All right, guys, welcome back to another Master and Apprentice video and podcast. How you doing today, Afton?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing today, Sammy?
I'm doing pretty good. So as you guys can tell from the title, we're going to be talking about the Star Wars timeline. And not to confuse you, it's not going to be what is the Star Wars timeline, like, periodically, but like actually how does the Star Wars timeline work? We have a lot of new shows and books and comics coming out in this new Disney era of Star Wars, right? And it can be really confusing sometimes. And so we kind of want to just go over like the parameters of what isn't canon, what is canon, what is legends, what do they actually mean, when did all this happen, just kind of that stuff, so you kind of understand when new stuff comes out, is it canon or is it not, and you're not confused, right? Because sometimes like Visions can be very confusing for fans. So to start off with, the very basic part to know is all the films, any of the films, if it's a film, it is canon and it always will be canon. That is the core parts. So obviously the first 6 films can't be changed. The next 3 from episode 7, 8, 9 canon. Then we have the Star Wars stories, Rogue One, Solo, then the Clone Wars movie. Those are all canon, and those are always going to be canon. So there's about 12 movies in all factual, right? That are all canon. So if there's ever any query or question, just remember, start with those 12 films. They are canon. It will be based around something along those lines. The next main thing when looking at a timeline for Star Wars is BBY and ABY. Before the Battle of Yavin and after the Battle of Yavin. Now, this is only important when you're looking at things canonically in the Star Wars universe, not when you're watching or looking at, from our point of view. But if you're looking at in the game or the series point of view, it's important because that is the Battle of Yavin. One being it's the first movie, right? A New Hope, the first Star Wars movie. So obviously that's super important. That's where everything should start. That's where everything's based from. But also just because the Battle of Yavin was such a drastic change in the galaxy, in the story, right? So everything's kind of based off of that. So if you ever see something, based in Star Wars BBY or ABY, it's part of the story, it's canon, and it's based off of the Battle of Yavin, right? So it's a main focal point in the story of Star Wars. Now extended stuff, so anything extended like games, books, novels, comics, graphic novels, about 95 to 99% of that EU stuff that was made before 2012 is not canon. It's what's called Legends. Legends means it's a Star Wars story, but it's not part of the main timeline. 2012 is when Disney bought Lucasfilm. When they bought Lucasfilm, they just kind of just put everything in the chopping block, said it's not canon. It's part of Legends, right? They kept a couple things here and there, but for the most part, everything just went out the window. It's not part of the main story anymore, right? So a lot of that stuff isn't even part of Star Wars universe. They still use a lot of the stuff, right? Like, Thrawn. Thrawn is actually originally from the EU, but they brought him into, the new Star Wars stuff, and they just kind of brought him in a different way. Not the same exact character, but very similar. Same thing with Quinlan Vos, a character like that, right? Part of the EU originally, but they brought into a new canon, new stuff, new lore in the Star Wars Disney era. And then anything that just says Legends on a book is also it's just not canon, right? Because sometimes every once in a while Disney will make one of its own books Legends, and that just means it's not part of the main story. It's a great story, and it might have importance somewhat, because it might just give good character development, so you kind of understand a character, but the main plot is just not important to the main timeline of Star Wars.
It's something to keep in mind when referring to any novel or comic is they come second to any on-screen media. So new stuff like Mandoverse, Filoni, Favreau, anything that they make always comes first. You ignore a book and you go with them first. If two things contradict, you go with whatever's seen on screen first. The show has the higher priority over it. Any show made while movies were still coming out is also just not canon. No particular reason. It's just what kind of happens. Like when the original Clone Wars run was coming out and all the Christmas specials, it's pretty much any animated project before 2008. Once the Clone Wars, the one that we love and know, came out, that's what counted. But any of the shows made into movies, they just don't count. That animated series used to be a TV show, and they bricked it up into a movie, and that's what it is now. It's just something fun to watch that doesn't technically apply to canon. Obviously, this is pretty obvious, but it should be stated. Vision, both seasons are not canon. They kind of say that whenever they made it, but they're just stories around what could happen in Star Wars. Tales of the Jedi is canon, but Visions is not.
As we kind of touched on it originally, but stuff can obviously come second to a new show or movie coming out, right? So like the Dooku book that came out, in the new era of Disney is no longer canon, right? With the Tales of the Jedi show kind of just contradicting it directly, making it not canon anymore. And that does confuse fans, but it's just to know anything that you see on screen, that is what is 100% canon. So if a book contradicts it or a comic, right? For instance, in the new Mandalorian season, we see Luke Skywalker have the lightsaber of Yoda. Well, in a comic series, the Empire destroys it. Well, obviously, we see it in the Book of Boba Fett season 1, so we know that's not true. So it directly contradicts it. Okay, the comic takes the knock, not the show. So that's always important to remember. It definitely confuses fans, so is it or is it not canon? If you see it on the screen, that's what's canon. Anything else comes second to that. So that you guys know. Definitely can be confusing sometimes. So let us know if you guys got any questions about any of that stuff. We might be missing something, so let us know down in the comments as well. It's an ever expanding universe. That's part of the fun and love that Star Wars gets. It's just how much there is and how much there can be, and sometimes it can be confusing. So we just kind of wanted to show you guys, with new stuff coming out all the time, this is kind of what you need to look for to understand things. So with that, I hope you guys did enjoy this. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, download and follow. And with that, we will see you guys in the next episode.
Peace.